Alrighty, here we are. Two Takedown Tribe. We got some great guests here as we're recording. It's actually Easter week and in the sports world, Masters week. So I'd like to say we have a master in our own right here. And we're going to talk about a lot of the women's wrestling movement today, the growth of it. And here, where I record from in our local area, we have one of the better female wrestlers to come out of here. There's been pioneers before her to a degree, but she's definitely doing big things and has done big things. And we have Tioga Central senior Emily Sindoni, a senior in high school, and her father, AJ Sindoni, which is probably the most important label as dad and first coach. Um, and so, welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
No, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here, Barry. So we want to support you just like you support this girls wrestling in our area.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, for those that might not know, I'm gonna throw out a little bit of like, here's some Emily's resume and what both of you guys are about, and I pose to you to add if something I'm unfamiliar is. I know enough to be dangerous. I'm involved and know it, but the very newness of the girls, as you know, sometimes there's like official sanctions. It's still so growing and developing that there's all these newness. But most recently, Emily just came off from, after the normal high school years in the sport. For years, they've had the boys version, and they've added the girls side a handful of years ago, maybe only a few years. But basically, the NHSCA, which is what's considered national, as it happens at Virginia Beach. Emily last year became a national champion, and this year defended that. And so she's now a two-time national champion. And I'll pose a question about that because I'm unfamiliar. We'll come back to it. But prior to that, New York State is where her home is here at Tioga Center in Section 4. So New York State is in the midst of truly becoming an absolute true women's sport. We're kind of in that beginning stages of it. But they had like what I'd call a really informal invitational last year. This year was they put their label on it, the NISFA, and it was an invitational. Maybe not exactly like the boys, but nonetheless, Emily's a state champion twice over there too, right? And then a junior nationals runner-up. Now that was basically Fargo, right?
Yes, that was the Fargo event. Yep.
That was 2 seasons ago or last summer, was it? Last summer.
Yeah,
Okay.
last summer. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's a big deal. And recently, she's chose her pathway to college. She's going to go to Utica University here, close to home, if you will, in the Syracuse region. Utica University has a brand new men's and female wrestling programs that they just announced in the fall. So she'll be that keystone, one of their signees to kind of forge her own path and develop there. And in general, she's been mixing up with the boys for some time from her youth right up through. She's at one of the powerhouse programs in New York State. Anyone in this state knows Tioga Central, where she's been training with some of the best, battling with the boys day in and day out. Even tonight, I think, came off an off-season practice. To be able to compete well, she found the best to where to compete, always did. And so that's where we're at with it. And AJ, I'll start it off and we'll converse with guys, but AJ himself, dad here, I'll probably reference dad here the rest of the time, but I would say watching from far has really turned the world over as any parent would sacrifice when she really developed and liked the sport. Took her to all the tournaments like the Classic Case. She's been there by her side the whole time. And first coach, always a coach inside besides, when she's gotten into what she'll be in college now, you'll always be that coach at her corner. The stands, getting her with the professionals now, the coaching staff at Tioga, and then Coach Laprizzi, a New York product himself, is the new coach at Utica. So that's what's coming. So that's where we're at with it. I'm going to put you to the side for just a minute, Emily. You stay with us, but just touch on a little of, if you will, me and Dad, you being local too, but here in our local New York State area, in our little small town, our valley area, Waverly, Sayre, Athens, Tioga, Spencer, this region, forever that name Sindoni has been implanted as in athletics. Just a big family tree. I mean, when you talk even non-sports, It's not been there for some time, but I know it's in the family tree. You had the banana fruit stand down in South Waverly, and just in general, that family name is here. Many people have wrestled. Dad wrestled at Waverly, correct, AJ?
Yeah, yep. So I graduated from Waverly.
Yeah, and myself too. We won't age each other, but I think I'm just a little bit older than you. And AJ, you were coached by Coach McCloughan Hughes, right?
Yeah, McClellan and Hughes were both there when I was there,
Right.
and that started the long history of a lot of good coaches in this area. So,
Yeah.
yep, that's who I wrestled for.
Right. And just uh, um we won't get into all the genealogy of the Sindoni name, but I mean people that I
Yeah, we'd be
relate
here a
to,
while.
right? We'd be here a while, but I'm pretty sure it's your cousin, an uncle, or a second cousin. Clint Sindoni is from my time, in my era, was a Waverly wrestler, and then there was Ricky, is a little older than that. I think their dad and your dads are brothers, and there were several brothers, and we were just talking about her off recording, but Miss Doris Sindoni, I remember she was one of the biggest athletic boosters in the area. Just always followed her own kids, but she was just one of those that you thought of as a mom. Just that mom figure. She's unfortunately passed, but she was the keystone of just supporting all that family tree, and especially wrestling, because there's always been so many wrestlers, right? You remember Miss Doris, of
Yeah,
course.
absolutely. I mean, they would save her a seat in the front row for every match.
Yeah.
Uh, she, everyone called her grandma. She had the wrestling team up at her house. I don't know how many times for every generation, not just my generation, but every generation. So yeah, everyone knew her and loved her, and she was a great supporter of wrestling.
I agree,
So
and you know, God rest her. I recently here at Christmas time, I was going through some stuff and saw a picture where one of these, you have when like you have small fry, like probably an after season pizza party. There was a picture. It's actually at our house in that era of like at the time would have been some of Waverly small fry coaches, and there she is sitting, and I think it was maybe the Kingston's father was sitting there, and just she was always a keystone. Is the point. Point of all that is the Sidoni name's been around a while, and you know Emily is just the latest and greatest in this area of in the sports world, especially and in the sport of wrestling, that she's doing big things. So, um, I want you guys to touch on this. I know big news is that the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, each state has its chapter. New York just had nominated. They put forward. Here's who we want to put forward as Emily as this year's New York nominee for what becomes, I think, one award in the nation. But being just the nominee of the state nominee is a big thing of the Tricia Saunders Award, which was a female pioneer in the sport way before, it was just an Olympic sport only and barely any, of what it is now. Touch on that, guys. Did you guys hear about that of just the news in the print or what went on there?
I know Coach Harrington had Emily, fill out her information and send it in, and to be nominated for the Trista Saunders Award is a huge honor in the wrestling world. And
Yeah.
they do have a region and one award winner, like you said, that they give out at the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in Oklahoma. So that's a big deal. I know Emily doesn't certainly just go after awards, but she certainly, I know in my experience, has always been very proud and accepting of those awards. And it's just it's a great big deal. I mean, people don't realize it, but it's a huge deal. Like Harrington said, I know he said it's like the Heisman of wrestling. So,
It
that's what
is.
we're going to take it as.
Yeah, for sure. And especially in the women's, specific category. That's what I'd compare it to. Of course, viewers or people that might be watching would know, touch on that. Emily's coaches at the Tioga program, Coach Harrington, and we have Coach Bellis, Coach Martin, but Coach Chris Harrington had the keys to that program for a while, taking it over from Coach Josh Rowe, who's in administration there. And they just
Yeah,
built.
so yeah, he took it over the year before Emily came up to varsity, and I remember Emily telling him, "I'm going to be on varsity next year," and he was like, "Who are you?" So that was our first experience with Coach Harrington.
Right.
Everyone that knows Coach Harrington would know, yep, that's definitely Coach Harrington, and how lucky she was to go from Coach Bellis and me, and then we sent her to varsity, and it's Coach Harrington, and Bellis ended up Jason Bell's ended up there with her, Ryan McQuinney. Um, I don't know if there's a better coaching staff from top to bottom in this area in Section 4 than what we have at Tioga. And I think the results have proven what happens when you care about your youth program. And, Coach Martin came along a couple of years after Emily had been a varsity, and, you know, they've had a special bond. A lot of that's because, Coach Martin's known the Sindonis forever. And uh,
Right.
so he took to her right away. And he always tells the story that he told her she wouldn't get away with anything because she knows everyone in her family, he'd said the very first day. So,
Right.
yeah, that's basically the coaching staff she's got, and it's been great for her.
Yeah. Um, one one thing we'll bring Emily in here so she doesn't think, well, I'm not even. Let's talk about me here a minute now. Obviously, we're talking about her a lot, but I want her to share some of her thoughts on one thing I know. Anybody that's been watching behind the scenes, and I know you see it. You know, it really wasn't that long ago. Girls might be wrestling. I mean, there's been even from our day, you'd have some girls participate that were very brave, but they would you know, in the youth they would might stand up well, but it was hard for a female for obvious reasons, just strength, many factors to really be able to hone themselves to be able to really compete when you get in high school level, regardless of even you have super quality programs. Now in recent years, that's been changing, even to the point of like I want to say this year, each of them might have a little different timing. That now several schools in our region have actually sanctioned, giving a little funding by the. I say that it's relative, but in a season, and they're forming a team by the school district. Tauga being one that was new, I think, as of this season, and Waverly, Horseheads. There might have been a couple others. Well, Emily, of course, has been participating as just a wrestler on that Tioga program. So it didn't change much for her mindset, but just being a pioneer that Emily of carving that path probably feels good and to see that, your little sis or people like that that might want to engage now have a system in place that's going to develop, even though it's in its infancy of an actual girls team. I mean, what does that feel good knowing, you and dad had to claw your way all through the youth and stuff and just make it happen for yourself. Find girls programs, find girls events, right?
Yeah, it feels good because when I would wrestle, there would be like nobody. Most times I'd be the only girl at the tournaments, and now that they have all these opportunities to wrestle all year long.
Yeah. And like you said, they're popping up more and more. I mean, probably maybe 3 years ago, you'd see a little bit of a glimmer of off-season trip, but now it's right there. Nationwide, it's the fastest growing sport. It's been happening at what we call it Olympic level and the international because some states have been ahead of the curve. But across the board now, universities developing programs like Utica coming every other day. You might see one, some blah 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 in Kansas, wherever it may be, added a women's program, and it's great because obviously gives opportunity, something to shoot for if somebody's never done something like that. But obviously, opportunity in college, just like you know, are going to be able to go to college and do something you're loving and have it be a way of means that you're finding opportunity. Speaking of which, the Utica then, speak to that. Like, what was that decision? Like, you just said, I'm going to go make something happen here at this new program. It's close to home. What was your mindset in, kind of giving your throwing your hat in the ring and going to Utica here coming up in the fall?
So when I was visiting schools, I was more leaning towards the schools that didn't have a program already, so that I could help build it up. And Utica was one of the ones.
Yeah, yeah. That's. Were you going to say something, Dad?
I was just saying, the school was great. It was a pleasant surprise to me. Originally, we started looking. She was looking at all the legacy programs in women's wrestling, and I think it said more about her when she decided to go the route she did by saying, I'm going to stay in state and I'm going to help build something for New York girls to go to that's competitive and where you can attain larger goals. And that's what she wants to do. And I think it says a lot about the type of person she is and why she's at where she's at right now. So,
I agree. I mean, obviously, like you said, people that wouldn't know the sport wouldn't know. I mean, I'm even a novice at. I know there's been many certain programs have been around a while. You have like McKendree and Kings and
Yeah.
obscure schools of some of us that we're not hearing of. But in the women's wrestling, they kind of were ahead of the curve and existed programs, be it an NAIA or there's Life now, and there's different distinctions where it might not the framework that we're used to, like an NCAA. That's all coming ideally. But speaking of which, like by definition, it'll be Division 3. Is it where nowadays it's just a generalized? There's like a national tournament that's like coaching association sponsored, right? NWCA or something.
Yes. So they have that right now, and it's basically this year it passed where it's was approved that it's going to be a championship sport here soon. And originally it's going to start off where all three divisions most likely will, compete together. So it's not really a D1 division, a D2, a D3. It's all going to be combined to start
Yeah,
with. So it doesn't matter, she's in D3, where most people that's what they think of, D1, D2, D3. But we didn't look at that because we knew it didn't really matter to start with
yeah, I'd
in the
agree
women's wrestling world.
that those distinctions may or
We
may
we
not come
just
to
looked
be
for,
like
yeah, absolutely. I
15
mean,
years from now.
it
But
could she could be done.
yeah,
Yeah, she could be done and gone. And we weren't. That was not the first thing on her list. Was D1, D2, D3 at all.
yeah, which I agree. That's just a matter. But I mean, they're scheduling. They'll just find schools that have programs, and I'm clueless to it, but they'll have that. But the ultimate pinnacle will be what there is a national tournament. That's like what the goal will be in the Utica competition.
Yeah. So right now they had. So last year, for instance, we would go to dual meets in Elmira, watch Elmira, Lock Haven, Elmira, and the local schools. And I'm sure that we're going to do some of that, if not next year, the year after. But there's tournaments every. They got plenty of tournaments. They have the open tournaments too.
Right.
They had for the NC the championship last year. They have regions, they have qualifiers. You go through it like a normal qualifier. They take the top, I think it was 5 girls last year from each region, and then they competed in the national championship. So it's basically already been there, but it just wasn't called the NCAA championships.
Right.
So the framework's there already.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me circle back to something now. This recent, it was only a couple weekends ago. Very exciting. I mean, anybody following locally, you'd been there before, but doesn't mean it just automatically happens. That now you're a two-time national champion. Um, now on the boys' side, they've distinguished. They have a freshman, a sophomore. The girls, it's all ages, right? When they created even that they had it. That's just women's.
Yeah, 9th and 12th.
It's all 9th through 12th, right? That's what I thought. And it's maybe they've only had a women's category for that. I'm saying that maybe 3 or 4 years, or even 2 or 3. Do you know, Coach?
Um, I, I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I know it's been at least a few years.
Yeah,
I'd say probably at least 4 or 5.
yeah.
Emily is the first one to win it twice from New York. I know that. So um, it's been I'd say probably 4 or 5 years for sure.
And it wasn't any how I know it was a fairly big bracket. How large was your bracket for competitors? Do you guys remember?
Uh, I think 50, right?
It was around 50. They were definitely in the round of 64.
In that
So
range,
I know it
yeah.
was at least in the high 40s
Right,
or low
yeah.
50s.
I mean,
Yep, she's right on.
that's showing you. I mean, it's a pretty big tournament. It's not like you just went and had 2 matches. And I know competitively you looked really strong. I mean, even in the finals, that was a 7-1 decision. And I mean, till the whistle blows, you never won it, but you had it under control for the most part. Um, and then even locally here, they had, in the season, you might do some women specific, and then you were competing at Tioga as needed on the team and the individual tournaments. Over your career, you've done a little bit of both. Obviously, for your own path, anytime there's opportunity to really have a competitive female, then you've done that. But this year they had that Southern Tier Memorial Open. They did have a girls division. I know there weren't huge numbers, but there were. Did that Florida team, or were there any other highly competitive, or just some local schools? I didn't watch that as seriously.
There was the Florida team did have Highland Prep had a couple girls that they brought up. None of them were in Emily's bracket, I don't believe.
Yeah, just weight
But there
wise.
were some. There was, yeah, I think there was one other ranked girl in the country there. Um, she was at a lower weight, like 107 or something like that. But it was mostly the local newer teams.
Right. Which is
And
great.
And
she's on the city,
yeah, who else was there?
Alessandra from
Oh
Tioga.
yeah, we did have. Yep.
I
Yeah, Alessandra's really good. She just committed to Deusville. She another New York school, so New York's building here. So she was there and won most outstanding wrestler that day. She's a very good wrestler. So yeah, there was some. There was a Long Island team there. It's going to get bigger, and that was a good start for
Yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah. I was only curious because I knew uh, the Lake Highland Prep is just a known school. I wasn't sure if there were some highly competitive girls that Emily had matched up with or not, or I wasn't familiar, so that's why I was curious of that. Um, Now, prior to you, to me, you've been forging a path for people behind you, but there were some people prior to you here locally. You guys would know more than me, but I know of just a handful, be it in the state or local. Now, locally, we had Cheyenne Sissenstein, was like you, always competing with the boys, competing strongly. Went on to do it. Blank time flies. She's already done with her collegiate. Now she's a coach locally, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she competed well. Um, and I want you to elaborate on this. And then I know there were the Macaluso sisters, which are down in Section 9 Minnesink area. Their family, like you to me, had been promoting women's wrestling for some time. Both those girls, like you, they're in um, a collegiate atmosphere now at East Stroudsburg, I believe, and they're doing some things. There's two sisters there, Sophia and Mia. Is that right? If I'm there may be others, but speak on that, what it was like when you were a little younger. I mean, you're not far behind them, but it's a big difference. Cheyenne now is a young lady coaching, out in the working world and stuff. So speak to that, like what you thought about that as you were coming up, Emily.
I thought it was pretty good that they were able to compete with the boys and do everything, and I looked up to them and how they were able to do it, so I knew I could. And when I was like a rising star, they called it at Fargo, they were three of the people that like helped me out and were like friends with me at Fargo.
Gotcha, yeah. People, a casual person, listen, Fargo has long since, it's become the nickname in it, but it boils down to in the nation age group level, but there's the pinnacle of the highest high school. There's now a women's division, men's, but in freestyle, comparable to Olympics, it's like if you're a finalist or you're winning that, it's considered a national title in freestyle. Everyone just gives it that nickname Fargo's. It's held every year in Fargo, North Dakota, in the Fargo Dome. So it became known as Fargo's. It is in the name officially. It's like the Marines national title or something, but that's what's amazing.
Nationals, junior nationals.
Right.
Yep.
And
It was.
that was a big, probably eye opener when you went to that year. That you only went the 1 year, right, in your career at this point, just based on
Uh, yeah,
time,
I only did
ability.
that 1 year. And
Yeah.
when I was in sixth grade, I went there just for the training camp.
Oh yeah, cool clinics and training.
They used to have a training. Yeah, they called it a Rising Star program. They've done away with that since, but she got to go out there and train with the team, and wasn't able to compete because she was too young. But she did get that experience and got to see people like Cheyenne wrestle out there. So it was a good experience for
What it's like, yeah.
her.
And of course, us three know the Olympic level has been pretty big things in the women's. There's been gold medal winners recently, Helen Maroulis and um, um, Mensa Stock is who comes to mind to me too. You know, gold medal winners in women's wrestling for the U.S. And recently there was a movie. This is how big women's wrestling is. I didn't see. Do you guys happen to see that? The Helen Maroulis movie? It was a one night only at this
We
point.
had, oh yeah, it was frustrating. It was one night only. We're hoping to catch it when it comes out, but of course I was coaching, of course, and we were unable to
I
hit that. But
I didn't
we're
catch
looking
it.
forward to it.
Something tells me it'll end up on a platform or be rentable or something. That was just the way they promoted it. But I
Yeah,
mean, that's exciting. It was produced by Chris Pratt, pretty big, Hollywood person who's a supporter of wrestling because he wrestled in his day in high school and just follows the sport and always wants to speak up for it. I think he helped produce it, but looked like probably a pretty good production following the pitfalls of Helen Maroulis was at the top of the sport, went through a lot of concussions, and then is coming back around and then achieve more. Just, that outside of the mat, what it was like. And that's hugely interesting. I just, in terms of the sport, have something that a casual person might, who knows, an Amazon or Netflix here in a few months might be able to, well, what's this about? And just see how amazing the sport is in the female category for sure. Emily, I wanted to always ask you that I want to, here we have a chance to, is like, I mean, you've held your own, as you know. That's why you've gotten to the level you're at, because you had to wrestle with the boys, and you did, and you didn't back off one bit, be it in youth, high school, and you went and you're training with and came up through the best. You knew it was going to do you better, I'm assuming. So I know there's the pros to it while you're at your air, but you had to be. You're a very good wrestler, and had your moments when you competed for the team. But meanwhile, for the weight range, you're behind this year two of the better boys they both placed, right? I mean, in that 126, 130 area, Giannis Silvestri, Deacon Bailey, just in how they ended up being. I know you had one of the Bellis brothers in those weights. The point is, very highly competitive boys that if you wanted to say, gosh, I want my run at the boys, it was hard to do because the nature of teams can only enter so many. But I think it's going to make you better for when now that you're going to concentrate on your female career. I'm assuming, and that was your mindset the whole time. I mean, just in terms of it, at times, would you have loved to have been able to say, I went in the boys division? Like a few girls have been able to have that at times because they've got out of a section. Do you ever want that opportunity, or just, hey, it's okay?
Yeah, that was always my goal, was to be able to go to boys states even, or even win a tournament. But like you said, most of the time I couldn't even get out of my own team.
And
But
that's
seeing these girls be able to do it, sometimes it gets frustrating.
And that's not the knock. I mean, literally, I'm sure there's days in the rooms where you could give them the best. Don't get me wrong. I know that. You know it in your heart. I know Dad does. But these were high level state quality kids in your own room that they were able to even send a second, and they both, placed well. So I'm sure that was at times in your own heart, maybe just like, I wish. But the trade off is you have those great training partners to get you where you're going to go next, right? And you always being able to concentrate in the female specific competition. So I imagine that's been amazing in that sense. It's going to pay off in the long run. Would you guys agree? That's the point there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we went to Tioga tournament this year, and in her side of in her bracket alone, we had 4 Tioga kids. 3 of them were ranked in the state, and Emily was ranked #1 in the country at the time, and that was just at our tournament alone, just from Tioga. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
that's going
winter
to make her
tournament.
better.
Yeah,
There's times where we wish she was in the lineup more, but our room is just
competitive.
ridiculous,
Yeah,
and it's gonna help her in the long run here, and she's gonna look back at that and be happy that she was in that wrestling room.
I agree. I mean, I, none of us have a crystal ball, but it's what's honed her and developed her to be able to do what she's hopefully going to be doing. And we'll all say we knew her. Um, yeah. Speaking of which, I was remiss to say that lately I mean, rankings are rankings, we all know, but it's still a huge thing from our small area. Emily's in a couple different, they're always subjective polls, but I want to say one in flow and one in just the USA Wrestling's version. She's now elevated to the #1 in her weight range, and it depends on how they split hairs and put her in what weights. But here for several months now, she had gotten to that being the #1 ranked high school level wrestler, her weight range, right? That's been huge,
Yep.
huge.
Yes. Yeah, multiple months now.
Yeah,
She's been #1 at 132. So, which is, I mean, we're at a school with 50 kids graduating. It's pretty amazing that that's even a possibility.
right. And
So, yeah, it's
collectively,
been quite a while now.
even to me, even our southern tier area, it's amazing.
Yeah,
Even if you take away the
it is
50,
nuts.
in general, it's amazing. Like she's been in the mix. Anybody would know, in that top 10 or 15 for a few years, and her name would be listed. But then she's done some things, and they are giving her due now. And then even locally, our news organization gave you the winner female athlete of the winter sports region recently. again, it's not about the accolades, but just to me, it allows people to see what the sport's about, what the female part of the sport's about, as opposed to just going to a swimmer or basketball player once more. Us guys that are in the sport, right?
Yeah, I've always said she's been my best recruiter, and that's without actually recruiting for the youth team, is because that those articles, as people may say, oh, it doesn't mean a lot. Yeah, it does. It means a lot to her. It means a lot to the sport. It means a lot to the young girls who are going to come up after her and see her collecting this type of, you know, notoriety. It's a huge deal to all the female wrestlers out there.
And I even take it a step further, Coach. I mean, Emily probably would be modest and wouldn't realize, but when we think about, there could be just a female fourth grader that doesn't know what she wants to do, but is looking for something to be engaged in and never even heard of wrestling, might not even, be it at Tioga or at Sayre, Pennsylvania, anywhere, but then sees that on the local news. Well, the female, now what does she do? She wrestles? Is there wrestling? They just find out when they, didn't know what they want to be doing. That's where I think it really is able to reach around a community. And, Emily, you'll look back and feel proud of that when you're in your 30s or 40s, like, wow, that's what will really count, I think, someday. It's exciting in that sense. Um, what about, you can't speak for her, but even little sis in your own family? I think she wrestles a little bit, right? And I'm sure you guys aren't her, but I'm sure she's always looking up at sis, right?
Yeah, I'll let Emily speak to that one.
Yeah,
What do you think, Em?
Probably, but she's just getting into wanting to fully do it.
yeah. I mean, hey,
She just came back this year. She just came back and was fully invested, I think, this last couple months. So
But she is
we're
not
excited.
gonna
She
go
could
for
be
the
good,
boys.
but
but she's,
no boys for her.
oh yeah, she went, but because there's opportunities, if she sticks with it, she'll be able to just, well, I want to just do the female, you know, because being honest, it takes, I don't mean strength, but it just takes some strength to be able to just be and not
Different.
feel odd when it was just boys only, and a
Yep.
character, and it's not for everyone to do that, as we all know, and doesn't mean somebody that couldn't do it is any less, but it took a lot for you to be part of that in your growing up years. So that's why you've been able to create those opportunities, blow those doors off. I mean, when I go back to the question I thought of, and I'm going to watch time, guys, we'll try to circle it around here, just a couple more things, but I know when I went to the New York boys this year and watched, to me, it's just exciting. There's a young lady, Charlie Wiley. Her name's Charlie, but a female. There were a couple other girls there, but she really jumped off the page at me. Of boy, it wasn't just that she was doing it and she was there. It was the way she was competing and not backing down. And I'd seen her name before, but I just was like, wow, look at that young lady. Um, and that's what I meant by I'm just repeating what we talked about, but I'm sure there's a lot of you that would love to have had that opportunity. But again, some sections it's easier to navigate those if you have a solid female wrestler than others. And your own room, much less our section, it's pretty darn competitive because there were other high level, I think there's a Shenango Valley kid in the weight. And so it's easier said than done, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
it definitely makes it is different. It's a lot different in our section for D2, of course. I think it just shows the depth of female wrestling in New York because Charlie, she does good in these national events and she competes well out there, but you would think a girl that goes to New York States would win everything, and she doesn't. And that's because of the depth of women's wrestling in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, she is excellent. And yeah, she's struggling to win girls events sometimes. Same as Emily does at these national events because they're so deep at those weights,
Yeah.
and she's in New York State boys tournament. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's how good female wrestling has gotten, and Charlie's going to be phenomenal,
Yeah.
phenomenal as she
Because
keeps getting older.
she was a little young yet, maybe only a freshman or sophomore, I want to say. So in terms of being she has a few more years of high school on both sides
That's what
of.
I'm saying. She's going to be
Yeah,
that experience at the boys state. She's going to be dominant, and it just shows the depth of New York State for female wrestling.
yeah,
I mean, Zoe was there too. Zoe's excellent.
yeah.
I don't know if she was in the finals at NHSCA, took second, but It just shows like
I knew that was
New
exciting when,
York women's wrestling
yeah, the
is
two
killing
New
it.
York females were like within a couple weight classes in the finals. It, I'm sure she wanted to go. I was there when Emily was in the finals. Like, wow, and that young lady Zoe too. Um, we'll bring just quickly to kind of wrap it up, guys. So what's next is we got Utica coming in the big picture. Do you know what you want to study, Emily, or not really know
Uh,
specifically? Like what focus you'll
probably
have?
biology
What biology?
on a pre-med track. Yeah.
Oh yeah, cool. Excellent. I mean, and obviously when you get there, this is my wise wisdom. Who knows? You know, you might find a shift, but you definitely want to have just a mindset of what you're doing. That's excellent. And then in the in the rest of the world, you're an outgoing senior. You've always been very athletic, enjoyed other sports. You did softball for a while. I know you did field hockey. Since you're kind of now focusing and going to go collegiate, I think you probably said, well, I got to focus on wrestling because softball you had to put aside, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I stopped playing softball last year for wrestling.
Yeah, just to kind of now you're in the transition high school to college, the focus. But what's coming up? You're training in the Tioga Center room for what we all call freestyle season, the off season. It's not as engaged but it is, and that everybody's preparing for some. But you, in your category, you're preparing for world team trials for an age group level, right? Under U20,
Yep, D20.
which would be like people that would know. It's like trying to make the Olympic team for your age group in a non-Olympic year, what you call the World Championships, to be able to then, should you be able to climb that ladder and go compete well and come out of the tournament. So this will be a big thing to just go compete, see what you've got. Um, and as far as a builder block, no matter the outcome of the things coming in the future for where your goals are, I'm sure, right? I mean, you speak, Emily, to whatever degree and dad then of just what's coming with that and where it kind of cascades her forward too. Even just the opportunity to go do this.
Yeah, so she is going to head out to Spokane. We're trying to get her ready for that. Um, yeah, at this time of the year, you're beat up, you're hurt, you're injured, and so we're trying to get her through so she can do that. Um, then Fargo will be her next big tournament. We were thinking about actually going to the U.S. Open, but I don't think we're going to do. I think we're going to pass on that with her beat up a little bit, uh, and save that for the 2028 path, hopefully for bigger things.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so we're just hitting the big ones this summer for her before she goes off to college.
Now, what is the timetable of the trials in Spokane, Washington, and Fargo? Like what months or weeks?
Oops,
We
I
might have
got a call
lost
here.
Emily.
Spokane is in April. It's in about 2 weeks, and then Fargo's not till July, and then she'll have.
With my phone.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up. Join
Fargo
Dad in
just
frame right here, Emily.
we're she'll hit World Team Trials, and then uh, qualifiers for Fargo are in May in Binghamton, and
Okay.
then
Yeah.
Fargo's in July. And if she makes one of those teams, I think Worlds is in August in Poland this year.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's the goal is Poland in August, and then she'll start her college career hopefully after that.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. And Emily, can you hear? No.
Can you hear Emily? Or no?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're gonna finish up anyway, so we'll do it low tech. Something happened with your phone, but we're finishing up anyway, so you can get some rest and R and sleep here after coming off practice. But here's what I want to finish with. Good luck in these endeavors. Okay. We're all pulling for you here in our local area. The Waverly, Tioga Center, Sayre, Athens area, much less New York State. It's big things. It's not about, really, it won't matter. Truly, it doesn't matter outcome. It does. I know that's their goals, but it's about what you're going to get from it and where you're going. But we wish the best of you in those World Team Trials in Fargo, and everyone's supporting you in that sense, for sure. I want to thank you guys for coming on, especially after a long, grueling practice. As you said, banged up, resting, trying to peak for these things. And I just always want to shine a spotlight on the women's movement too, and especially when you were so fresh off that national championship. Just how I'm always finishing this podcast is that, Mark Stevens, I'm sure you knew who he was, right, AJ? Just a guy that was,
Yeah, we know Mark.
yeah,
Yep.
and Em did too. It sounds like in our time, a referee, always a coach. He was always a coach. You can't not be a coach, as you know, but once you've been around the sport. But in his day, he was a pinnacle of the freestyle area for the boys. I mean, and he was him and say Coach Gumbles, the Gumbles out of Forks were probably the biggest spearheads for back in the boys' time of like that off season stuff when it was still like and not everybody engaged in it, back in the day. But he used to always say in the spirit of the sport, and as you know, AJ, Coach McClough, who he came up with, he around the holidays and as he ended practice, ending the podcast, I always want to say, go home and hug your mom. So
Yeah.
whether you're there with mom tonight or not, Emily, next time you see, hug mom. If they're not with us, and because of who we talk about, I'm going to say a spiritual hug Miss Doris too. She was one of the big booster. I'm sure she's smiling down at what Emily does nowadays. But we want to always share to hug your mom.
Yeah,
It would make the
absolutely.
world better. But thanks, Emily, so much. And I know it's been a hard technically hearing here, but it was great having you guys. Get some rest and go get it out west. Spokane, Washington, coming soon. Emily Sindoni right here from Tioga Center. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.